Every narcissist uses the same 4 mind traps to turn you into their supply. And it doesn't matter if you think you're strong. It doesn't matter if you think you've seen it all before. And it doesn't matter if you're sure it won't work on you. The truth is, these traps are designed to work on a subconscious level, where your empathy, fear of conflict, and your desire for validation take over. They keep you entangled in their web, no matter how much you try to resist. And today, I'm going to show you how these traps work, starting with trap number 1, victimized manipulation. All right, so what is this? Well, it's when the narcissist constantly positions themselves as the victim in any situation, no matter the context. They'll frame themselves as misunderstood, neglected, or wronged, using this narrative to essentially elicit pity from you. And their goal is simple. It's to tap into your empathy, making you feel responsible for their emotional state. All right, so what does this look like in real time? Well, look at this. This is a Reddit post on the subreddit Raised by Narcissists. The poster says, having a mom constantly playing the victim is draining. And then the poster goes on to say, then she gains support from the rest of the family because she's that good at being manipulative, which leaves you being the bad child because how can you talk to your own mother like this? Now, I chose this example specifically because it's coming from a family member. I mean, imagine that for a moment. The very people who are supposed to love and support you unconditionally are the ones twisting your emotions, making you question your reality. Instead of feeling safe, you're left walking on eggshells, constantly trying to manage their emotions while sacrificing your own. It's even more damaging because family bonds are meant to be built on trust and care. Yet, in this dynamic, those bonds are used to control and manipulate. And they know that. I mean, the Raised by Narcissists subreddit almost has 1 million members. And it's full of stories just like this. Mom manipulated me by denying my past actions, came to the realization that my mom has been manipulating me. The extent of my mom's manipulation makes me sick. All of these stories are just different variations of the same victimized manipulation trap. But let's move on to trap number 2. You'll be sorry when I'm gone. All right, I promise I'm going to dive deep into this trap, but first I want to show you something. This is an article written by a website called After Narcissistic Abuse, and they bring up a really interesting theory. You see, they believe every narcissist has 2 camps of people, those who don't know them and like them, and those who do know them and can't stand them. And I'd actually like to add to this theory. I mean, think of the timing of when this would actually occur. The people who don't know them likely aren't supply yet. They are probably in the process of becoming a narcissist's supply, whereas the people who do know them and can't stand them have likely already been victimized. They've already been supply and kind of are trying to escape. And that's where the second trap comes in. Where trap number 1 is likely used by a narcissist on someone to prolong their supply, you usually see the second trap employed to prevent you from leaving. All right, let me tell you a story. Imagine there's a mother and a daughter. For years, the mother uses emotional manipulation in almost every interaction. Anytime there's a disagreement or the daughter tried to set boundaries, the mother would twist the situation, making herself the victim. She'd say things like, "After everything I've done for you, how can you treat me like this?" Or, "I guess I'm just a terrible mother, aren't I?" Now, these little guilt trips worked for a long time, and the daughter would always give in, apologizing just to keep the peace. But eventually, this wears on the daughter. Quite frankly, it gets exhausting. The constant emotional manipulation, the guilt trips, and the never-ending drama. It's all too much. So the daughter starts to pull away, distancing herself bit by bit. And that's when the mother panics. Sensing that she's losing her grip, she starts making subtle threats. "You'll regret this when I'm gone," she'd say, or "One day you'll be sorry when I'm no longer here." Now, the implication is clear. The daughter was supposed to feel responsible for her mother's emotional well-being, even her life. The mother even went as far as to hint that she might do something drastic, a not-so-subtle threat of harm. But it gets worse. Most of society really doesn't understand the daughter's plight. The daughter goes to her friends and tells them about the problems with her mom. They don't understand. In fact, they guilt her with stories of their own about how their parents passed away. Or they bring up a story about how they knew someone whose mother died and that person's last conversation with her was bad, and now that person is racked with guilt. But the daughter has heard the "you'll be sorry when I'm gone" spiel a million times, and all it ever did was guilt her into staying into an abusive situation. And this is the essence of trap number 2. It's a last-ditch effort to maintain control, playing on your fear of loss and guilt. They want you to believe that if you leave, something catastrophic will happen, and it will be your fault. It's emotional blackmail designed to keep you tethered to them, no matter how badly they've treated you. But let's move on to trap number 3, conditional validation. Have you ever watched The Big Bang Theory? It's a sitcom that revolves around a group of socially awkward yet brilliant scientists as they navigate love, life, and challenges of fitting into a world that doesn't quite understand them. There's this episode in the 3rd season called the Gothowitz Deviation. In the episode, one of the brilliant scientists, Sheldon, uses operant conditioning to modify Penny, his neighbor's behavior. He does this by rewarding her with chocolates whenever she does something he approves of. He essentially treats her like a subject in a behavioral experiment without her realizing it. Now, The Big Bang Theory is a comedy. It's meant to be a joke. It's meant to be humorous. But if you kind of think about this whole situation, there's sort of a dark element to all of this. Sheldon is manipulating Penny's behavior without her knowledge or consent, essentially controlling her actions in secret. And it highlights a disturbing truth. When someone is doing this, it sort of takes away your autonomy. It's not just a lack of consent, it's psychological control masquerading as affection. Now, to the episode's credit, it does address this dark truth, albeit it does it in a comedic way. Leonard, one of the other brilliant scientists who happens to be dating Penny, eventually discovers what Sheldon is doing and confronts him about the manipulation. He points out how wrong it is to control Penny's behavior without her consent. However, because The Big Bang Theory is a sitcom, the seriousness of the situation is downplayed for humor. Sheldon, being oblivious to social norms and ethics, doesn't really fully grasp why what he's doing is wrong, and the show treats it more as a quirky misunderstanding rather than a true violation of consent. Here's the point I'm getting at. Sheldon is a make-believe fictional character. The show basically says he doesn't know any better and we're supposed to laugh it off because it's just in his nature not to understand. But narcissists are not fictional characters and they know exactly what they are doing. They use the same tactic, conditional validation, but with far more intentional and damaging results. Just like Sheldon with the chocolates, a narcissist will reward you with love, affection, attention, or approval when you behave the way they want. Yet this isn't a simple experiment or a quirky misunderstanding. It's manipulation designed to keep you dependent on their approval. And unlike in this sitcom, there's no laugh track at the end of it. Narcissists control your actions by making you believe that your value is conditional upon meeting their needs. You're constantly chasing that next reward, whether it's affection, approval, or just not being ignored. Over time, this erodes your sense of self-worth and autonomy, making you feel like you must always earn their love, while they pull the strings knowing full well what they're doing. And really what this results in is the final and most devious trap. Trap number 4, the inauthentic space. All right, I want you to take a look at something. Prior to this trap, I've shown you 3 others. Victimized manipulation, the "you'll be sorry when I'm gone" trap, and the conditional validation trap. Now, individually, these traps are bad, but when they are combined, they create something far more insidious. A place where the reality of the victim begins to shift, and it molds itself around the narcissist's distorted worldview. And it's what I like to call the inauthentic space. Let's break it down. We'll start first with the victimized manipulation trap. This traps you into a cycle of guilt and responsibility. The narcissist constantly positions themselves as the wounded party, making you feel as though their pain is somehow your fault. They play the victim in every scenario, shifting blame and reframing situations so they are always the ones suffering. You, as an empathetic and caring person, feel compelled to alleviate their suffering, but it often comes at the cost of your own needs and boundaries. The lines between what's real and what's manipulation blur, and suddenly you're constantly apologizing, constantly making amends for things that were never truly your fault. This begins to shift away from your own reality. Now remember that reality shift because it's important for what comes later. Next up is the "you'll be sorry I'm gone" trap. Now this trap preys on your deepest fears, your fear of abandonment, your fear of loss, your fear of guilt that will haunt you if something catastrophic happens. The narcissist escalates the manipulation by subtly or not so subtly threatening that their absence will devastate you, either emotionally or even physically. They might imply that they could harm themselves, or they'll claim you'll regret it when they're gone forever. We literally did a whole thing about this. And it's really this threat that keeps you tethered to them, unable to leave, as you feel an immense pressure to stay and save them. Here, your reality begins to warp even further. The thought of leaving becomes terrifying, not because it's inherently scary, but because you've been conditioned to believe that if you do, everything will fall apart, and it will all be your fault. Then finally, we have the conditional validation trap. And this really rounds out the narcissist's arsenal. You begin to learn that any approval, affection, or love you receive is conditional. When you behave in ways that satisfy the narcissist's needs, you're rewarded with attention, praise, or brief moments of closeness. But when you step out of line, when you assert your own needs or challenge their behavior, those rewards vanish. You are punished with coldness, distance, and outright hostility. Over time, you come to realize that you have to earn every bit of affection or approval, and that love is something you must constantly work for. You're trapped in a cycle of trying to please them, desperate for those fleeting moments of validation. This conditional reward system shifts your perception of love and worth, making you believe that your value is directly tied to how well you perform for the narcissist. And here's where things get really messed up. When these three traps, victimized, manipulation, you'll be sorry when I'm gone, and conditional validation combine, they create what I like to call the inauthentic space. It's a place where your reality dissolves and it becomes replaced with the narcissist's false reality. You start to doubt your own emotions, your own experiences, even your own worth. The narcissist controls not just your actions, but the way you see the world. You exist in a constant state of tension where nothing feels solid or certain except for the need to please, appease, and protect the narcissist. In this space, your authentic self, the person you truly are, gets buried. You're no longer making choices based on your needs or desires, but on what will keep the narcissist happy or calm. Your reality shifts to accommodate theirs, and over time you lose sight of what's true, what's right, and what you actually want, and you become a version of yourself that exists solely to survive in their distorted world. And here's the tragic part. You're like an elephant being chained. You see, when elephants are young, they are tied to heavy chains they cannot break free from. Over time, they become conditioned to believe that no matter how strong they grow, they cannot escape. So as adults, even though they have the strength to snap the chain effortlessly, they remain in place, convinced of their powerlessness. The same thing happens to you in the inauthentic space. You have the power to leave, to break free from the manipulation and control at pretty much any time, but through years of conditioning, guilt, fear, and manipulation, you've been made to believe that you're trapped, that the only way to survive is to stay put. Like the elephant, the mental chains hold you far more effectively than any physical restraint ever could. It's a silent, invisible prison that distorts your sense of freedom and control. And the moment you recognize the power is within you, not in the narcissist's manipulation, not in their guilt or control, you begin to see the chains for what they really are, an illusion. The door to your freedom has always been open. The hardest part is recognizing you can walk through it anytime you choose.